the easy class. I still would.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's really annoying. Like,
Next time I actually try.
I purposely like try to ask questions that didn't start out so many easier class, but they still take us.
All right, welcome everyone. Let's start off with the web work. First of all, Allison pointed out that if you were starting the homework 7 early, it wasn't allowing you to actually save your answers. Sorry about that. I had entered the due date of the assignment as October 1st, 2020 instead of 2021. So that is now fixed. So what questions do you have about homework 6? Ready? 6A.
Oh, actually, sorry,
Which one?
sorry, I meant
11A. There isn't an 11. 1A. Okay. So a sample is called biased if the statistic overestimates or underestimates the parameter. So in general, it's better not to refer to the sample as biased or unbiased. It's the sampling process that's biased or unbiased. And the reason for that is that any given sample probably is going to either overestimate or underestimate the parameter. Probably we're not going to get the parameter spot on. But a representative unbiased sampling method is going to give us statistics that underestimate or overestimate the parameter approximately equally, rather than a biased sampling method will systematically do one or the other. So that's why this answer is false. Other questions about the web work?
9B.
9B. Okay, so this was the Huntington's disease problem, and we want to know the probability that all of this family's children have the same disease status. So either they all develop Huntington's disease or none of them do. So in other words, if we let's say X be the number of kids with the disease, then we're looking for the probability that X either equals 3 or X equals 0. Because these two possibilities don't overlap, so it can't both equal 3 and 0 at the same time, we can split this up into the probability that X equals 3 plus the probability that X equals 0. And then X here is a number of true values, a number of yeses, out of a fixed number of observations, so 3 kids. And the disease status of each kid is independent. So we can use a binomial distribution to find each of these. And which function are we going to use to find the probability that X is exactly 3? Yeah, that's binom PDF because we're finding the probability of a particular value. So this is going to be binom PDF of 3, 0.5, 3 plus binom PDF of 3, 0.5, 0. questions about this? Sure.
Why are you adding them if you just want one or the other?
Because we want the probability of that either of these things happens. So the biome PDF of 3 will give us the probability that they all 3 have the disease. Biome PDF of 0 will give us the probability that none of them have the disease. So when we add them together, we get the total probability that either they all have the disease or none of them have the disease. Does that make sense? Yeah. I like to mix in review problems. That way, once we get to the final exam, you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the semester and cram it all in. We'll have some review all the way through the semester.
Yeah.
Other questions about the homework?
You just typed it in.
I didn't think it's sure it was. I was like, well, I don't know how that. Other questions about the homework? All right. Any questions about the video that you watched for today? Okay, so today we have an activity to investigate whether UWEC students get an average of less than 8 hours of sleep per night. So if you haven't already, I'll give you access to the computers in a moment. If you haven't already, go ahead and enter how much sleep you got last night in the hours of sleep Google Doc. And then we'll be able to use the data from our class to analyze this question.
Just not realizing. I got like 7 hours and 15 minutes.
So please give this a try and let me know if you have questions. And for anybody watching this recording later, this is the hours of sleep activity.
Yeah, I wrote down my notes. I didn't look at it. It's right there. Is that like
Oh, the population.
parameter?
So permanent is where mu is the
Parameter.
So it's, I think it's just stats. We're not trying to like.
Sure.
Because it's just a spec. Okay.
Yeah.
Average estimated.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. I know, I don't know. But also that's probably not.
No.
And the one would be like last year.
In mathematics.
Parameters, so it's wait, it's
We're saying it needs to change.
For like this, it's a portion, like that's how it was represented. Are they actually?
So the number of hours of sleep that we
Less than-
get is quantity.
Not less than or equal to, right?
Right, so we're not treating it as a proportion, we're treating it as a long run need.
Okay.
Not
What ways might our class be?
So that a whole number.
Maybe it's one regulations.
Because we're like.
You can make that the-
hours of sleep.
I wonder if I didn't know what the thing was.
Not that, so like.
yeah.
I think numbers, right? I'm also.
So is there?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And we're all technically. So wait, I wrote that. Oh, so we're not back
So we have some procedures.
But so that we can practice using one thing applet, let's do it as what is the average hours of sleep.
That's good though. It's pretty good.
So the parameter is the average number of hours. The mean number of hours.
The long run.
and then we're back on that.
So that's a good question.
Okay.
Depending on what, how you think about your
On all our students too.
the long run mean hours of sleep of students in class, and then you're generalizing.
Wait, so they think good if I'm computers?
I
And
said,
then you
I
can-
said,
Average hours of sleep,
Yeah.
all of the.
So these stats
last night.
Prior.
And then generalizing this class.
Like this class.
Honors and. That's good.
So this is the parameter that is represented by the sample.
Alright, this sounds like an iPad.
You tell me twice. I think you can make an argument either way. Depending on what's represented. Nights or this class, or whether you feel like this class is more representative of all of this.
You already got the data?
Eli's voice. I'm seeing exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like do that.
Is that something we wait for after 4 or we just?
I hope that. I just copy.
Because I feel like 6 are supposed to do and 7 we have to wait back. So what do you think?
So like we're taking less like.
Wait.
Classes that doesn't.
It's either the equal standard or it's. Yeah, it's like.
I'm trying to put it, yeah.
Go ahead.
Like there's some videos.
Just like all examples.
Yeah.
I'll write that one.
Because I already know what kind of video you have to do. Right, the license.
Oh, wait, we have to go. I can't.
Yeah, just do it. Show the answer. I feel like getting permission.
Oh, you gave me permission.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe it's like for the video one. They count it all.
I think it's.
But like what was the what value?
I think it's the note. I think it's note because it's assuming the note.
Would you like shift the video?
Yeah, it's just that,
So where are we shifting?
I think you're going.
It's not gonna tell us how to shift it. You just click it on it. So like, you can watch the video. Shift the mean to match the
Yeah. That's right. So.
So.
We're doing it. Oh, it's all sort of shifting. Four, 6.
I'll go down.
14.
I can just
Oh, I thought it was teacher. How many scores that? 13.
Estimate of the length.
Number of samples. Number of 40 samples. So 14, 45.
The sample size of those
I know, some of the number of samples.
Right, so what's 14? Oh, no, that's.
It's just 40, right?
Oh. That's because we have to.
No, that's a sample. They're doing 40 samples of 13. This is 40 samples of 13.
Okay.
How far are we shifting it from? Okay then.
Is that just the mean? What is the mean?
No, you define that difference from 8. We're shifting it to 8, so we're only shifting over 0.00. No, it don't shift it. It's supposed to speed. Yeah, we shift. We're gonna shift it. 0.001 with the 8. Right?
I guess. The video, she like took like the.
She got this whole.
She took the means like 300.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe that's what that is. That's, I would guess that's because that's like the mean of all the shipping we do, you know?
We shift it and then make it graph one mean.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was the actual mean in the data?
Yeah, like you just, yeah, exactly. It's like just shift it.
Yes, and the shift is.
You're just like, why is it already 8? We got lucky.
Yeah, we got really good data.
It's just like I was spot on.
It's like.
That's
really.
So it's gonna stay wrong. We just really good.
We're just gonna write 8 this way for them.
So they're.
Also good. I'll put the video.
So because they run.
Looks like haven't done the.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It is.
So those.
No.
Oh, no, we're.
Okay.
So number of samples.
Third stage draw.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. Try. The samples are third.
And then.
Okay.
Now let's try.
Now it's
Oh, what, actually, the population.
Alright, that makes sense. So mean is
But, like, honors program,
What was
That's the mean of.
0.07.
Oh.
Looking at the third chart.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's 0.07.
So.
If that's what it is. Well, yeah, mean shift, you're right. That's the mean.
Yeah. That's the mean of all the ships.
Okay, so.
You're like.
P-value.
Actually, just what it's clear.
Has the same thing.
Oh, it's like. So that would.
Well,
No, that's not equals to. Oh, she was very close to.
Yeah.
So the answer is less than.
You put down this again in the blank.
I think so.
I'm putting down this copy again, and then what's the p-values?
It's point
Include the
four
hours.
something.
So that sucks. But it's modern.
So, yeah, is that modern or is that blue?
That's like equal to none.
That's like,
0.
yeah, that's like no evidence. Or very.
It's called nothing. Like if it doesn't say
So,
point zero. it's
yeah,
trash.
so there's, no.
No, hypothesis.
Yeah, so that's
Oh,
hours.
There we go.
So now you're.
No, I don't. I'm gonna say no. Well, right.
Less than.
One person didn't do it.
I don't know.
What do you do?
Personality, I just think it's gonna be obvious.
Yeah, I guess.
We already do that. Of course, not, you know, just sleep.
I just have like.
4.75.
So there's no chance.
Sorry, you were right. You're not this one. Or wait, I'm this one. Look at that.
Alright, and the new p-value, I don't think it's. That's not, that's.
Right.
Whoever you.
So you're allowed. The sample is cute. You guys have to revise this. I'm not in this conversation. Wait, is this like, this is no longer your question. How do you feel? Over that. So.
It wasn't.
So. So that's your, I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's going on.
That answer is very strong.
So your p-value is the proportion of simulation sample is less than, what was the mean in your original sample?
You wanna know?
That was,
Oh, this is the problem.
before you did the shifting.
Or did you already?
Are you talking about, well, this is just what they do. We're not for like, so.
Did you copy in the data from our file?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I did them.
Good.
But, yeah. Yeah, I did that. I thought you were talking about like this.
Out the data side and then use the data part that one again. I'm just worried, I'm worried that like data got pasted on above some of the examples.
What did it?
I cleared it, so.
You tried to do it, I'm just like, it's just the cheese section. Not changed.
It says choose variable, because that says 8.25, I think I should paste it in again, but it has to be hours. It's on the top of
I
that.
didn't even create that.
Ready?
Oh,
Yeah.
don't you sound like this?
There we go. So now it says choose variable hours. That's better. So that says it's reading that this is the variable hours.
Do you have time?
Alright, so
Nobody
you'll have a chance to practice on what it's at.
Nobody has.
Okay, so what's your niche?
How's that?
Okay.
Oh, I get it.
So very strong evidence that average hours.
Not 8 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it would be different if we should have won 7. You're not gonna like do 17 or something, or we made sure, wait, we didn't shift.
It went from.
Wait, no, it's like you guys.
I think what we're trying to figure out. So I don't know, this is like the new shift.
The new shift is what creating.
I subtracted
The chance to get. Say.
Is that what we're?
That's the thing, though.
Actually, we can just make it over.
And now let's see how we usually is to get.
What about you think? If I do this on 1, you subtracted that down there.
So if you do, I think
So we have to make some.
Are we supposed to shift that? What are we supposed to shift it into this?
Okay, got it.
Because like, we're gonna increase a lot.
Okay, so and then here's.
Yeah. So that's.
So the mean shift is 0.079. Sorry, 0.5.
It's 0.7.
That's what we shifted
No,
at.
we shifted this, remember how was it 7?
Oh, okay. So you ignore that.
Yeah, ignore it, yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know, but 6 is still correct, right? We're still less than.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what's
What's the real peak value?
So.
So I have to change my entire program.
No.
Yes.
So we're still trying to figure
Are you sure?
Oh, no.
It sounds like it's not real, but it's exactly.
Is that,
Yeah.
Is scheduled.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be around.
No.
Okay, well, where's the exact name?
Sorry, are we?
I think we're good. I think we just reset the shelves.
She's probably.
Yeah.
It's like it's supposed to number.
Stop.
I don't know.
No, wait, that's.
Okay, well then. Something that was. Okay, well.
Yeah.
They have their value. Whatever there's no line as the original. So we're seeing how close they are to this other average sample, and just shift it down.
Wait.
Someone subtract like 7 million.
Yeah,
Who's that?
that's the red line.
So.
Take 8.002, subtract 0.79. Then put that here instead of 8. That's what Ray is trying to say.
Yeah. There you go.
And put that instead of 8.
On this?
Yes.
We're trying to see if all data is extreme compared to the average sample.
It'll actually show us.
Yeah.
Boom.
And it is.
Population data.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna have to write that down.
Wait, so our key value is 0?
I think so. Sure.
And you should.
We're right off
see
on
that
like that.
the shift and the needs of.
My parent does something wrong. Yeah, ask for a
Okay,
raise.
look at the
That's a sure.
We might not be able to get it.
I'm so confused. One more time, it's gonna be so hard. It's like hours.
No, I like looked at it and I thought.
I'm literally trash evidence somehow. Trash evidence. It's solid.
Sorry.
What is it, you got?
Don't get 8 hours of sleep.
Fantastic evidence. For. Shoot, the board.
Are you sure this is?
I literally couldn't change the keywords. Awesome evidence for them. There it is. Yeah, Mr. Mason, no, there is evidence that we just get more than 8 hours.
We're.
I'm not gonna change anything. Let's change that.
I moved her back up. Like, is that eight? Sorry, I was like, oh, that's not. Zero. Just go back to zero.
Somebody number.
Okay.
Okay, can you look at the data? I'm gonna see what last year. See what we did. There's a few. Explain. That's all. Oh, that's it. Other than that, for that, it's pretty good. To tell you. Mine's 7.15, I mean. Not really.
Otherwise,
Well, the night before, I got like 4. That's how glad it was last night. I worked at 2 a.m.
The what?
I haven't checked it out, but
I worked there.
just check. Oh, it's a giant house.
Today, the Chipotle opened up.
Really?
Yeah, so to 2, what? It opened up to 2, and there's a test run trial, and they're handing out free food.
Wait, what? Okay, I was gonna look at your college today, but I looked online, we took the class.
Yeah, I don't go in.
No.
I just bike over and get some bike.
Buy the $250 gas.
Well, they still close semester walk with it.
Oh, yeah.
You take right across Claremont. You just go across that CBC bridge, walk down to the right, and you're almost there.
Okay, our turn.
This is correct.
Is this something?
Well, I don't think it's asking us for
The mean of the population, that's good. You're finding the proportion of samples that are less than or equal to 0.7212 is what you had from your original meeting.
Yes.
Cool, yeah, that looks good.
Good, I can change my name.
Does that all make sense now?
No, I have no idea.
Yes, it does now.
When you go over it.
Our p-value is what it is.
Yep, so the p-value is approximately 0.
Yeah, because nobody here gets one day, like one student.
Like, would it just be like?
I don't think I can, I can more sleep now, like.
Yeah, like. They're strong.
The bus will come at 6:15.
I thought your personal.
So, yeah.
But they do get this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I would-
Wait, so we've gone this moment by,
Our original need,
which was.
7.212.
But
then
So in
it-
other words, you should just look at the mean before you shift it.
No, you just use the mean,
You're like.
you just use the mean we got.
Yeah, I know, I'm saying, if we mess it up, not mess it up.
Just look at it before you shift.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Why are you saying? You just do it, you don't need like make a separate step out of it, it's just the mean. It's just the mean of the data.
I don't know. I think it's less than 2.
I think we should do it in Spanish. Or yet.
Okay. This is just that now, but I know what, flower. I know what this is.
No, that'd be the same.
I'm already close now. That's me from well, like someone's trying to
Yes,
stab you. I still don't know, I can ask.
for the sampling, now you're gonna be
Are you minors?
from that population.
I don't even know why I took it.
So for that, I would probably.
I need to.
It wasn't even necessary, I really just took it. Like it's straight up, they call it high school Spanish 1. That's what it was. I started the meeting and then easy stuff, and then you just keep going. You have 3 years of high school Spanish in 1 semester. I don't know why that class went so fast. Like anyone who did do bad on that test on purpose. They was teaching so fast. Like 3 years in high school Spanish, they just done it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to do stuff now that I know, and I take a Spanish.
Oh, but also maybe yes, because.
I go
Yeah, that was me. I already knew it. Yeah, but I wanted to get. That's why I'm trying to answer all the questions.
Like, it's talking about John's
Like wake yourself up.
Yeah. But they.
So that made this year.
I remember some. Like when we used to go to-
So then there's like what? May, Febio.
All right, so let's talk about this. So here we have a quantitative variable. In other words, when we've written down the data with like person 1, 2, 3, ... We're writing down their hours of sleep. So it's like 8, 6, 7.25, ... We're recording the value for each observational unit as a number where numerical comparisons make sense. Makes sense to say that the person with 8 hours of sleep got 2 more hours of sleep than the person with 6 hours of sleep. So this is a quantitative variable. So that means that we can analyze it and look at its mean. So our parameter here would be a mean hours of sleep. You can think about this in a couple of different ways. You could think about using last night as a sample that represents this class in future nights. So then you could say that it's the long run mean hours of sleep of this class. Or you could think about this class being a representation of all of UWEC for last night. So in that case, it would be the mean hours of sleep of all UWEC students last night. So here we're thinking about it as a long run process, or here we're thinking about it as all people in a population. But either way, it's a mean that we represent with the symbol mu. So what is our null hypothesis? Sarah? Yeah, the null hypothesis is that mu is equal to 8. And then the alternative hypothesis, just like when we were working with a proportion, the alternative hypothesis uses the same parameter, so mu, and the same numerical value, so 8. The only thing that changes is the symbol that goes in between. So in this study, what inequality do we want? Sandra? Less than, because our problem setup said we wanted to test whether the average amount of sleep that UWEC students get is less than 8 hours. All right, let's skip down to problem 5 and look at the applet. Okay, so there was a fair amount of confusion about how to use this applet, so let's go through this. We can start by clearing out the existing data that was in here, which it's a little bit confusing that it's also about sleep. And then we want to copy in the data. Something that it looked like all the groups encountered was you actually do need to copy this hours label. Because when we copy that in here, we'll click use data. It treats that as the label of the column, and it says it lets you choose the variable you're going to analyze. So we could have other columns in here besides hours if we wanted to analyze multiple things in one data set. But if you leave out the hours, then it says choose variable 8.25, and it treats the 8.25 as the name of the thing we're trying to analyze, rather than a number that it uses to as part of the analysis. Okay, so right now we have a population size of 12. So that was our original sample size, and a mean of 7.213. And we'll just write that down so we remember it. X bar equals 7.213. So that's our sample mean. So I've written it as X bar to reflect the fact that it's from a sample, rather than mu, which is the mean of the population. All right, so now let's increase our population size. So we can click the X40 to essentially make 40 copies of each of you. That would be pretty entertaining. And then we need to shift the mean. So how much do we need to shift the mean by for this problem? Mary? 0.787?
Like 0.79.
So how'd you get that?
So yeah, we did 8 minus 7.213.
Yeah, so this 0.79 is what we need in order to change the mean from what it was originally, the 7.213, to 8. And the reason why we do that is because this is now our chance model. This is our made up population that has a mean equal to 8, because that's what we said in our null hypothesis. So now we'll go up here and click show sampling options. Now we're going to take samples from this made up population and see how unlikely it is to get a sample of size 12 that was at least as extreme as the actual sample that we took. For number of samples, what should I put? Mary?
1,000.
You put 1,000? That's a nice big round number. Anybody choose something different? All right. So key point here is that this number of samples is not the same as this 40 down here. This 40 was what we used to create our made up population. So that was just like duplicating our sample a bunch of times to call that, suppose that's our population. This 1,000 is going to be how many times do we want to take a sample from this made up population and find the mean hours of sleep in that sample. So we're gonna end up with a graph down here that's made up of 1,000 little bars. All right, and what should our sample size be? So table 4, what'd you use for your sample size? What? 12, yeah, because that's what our actual sample size was. So just like in the one proportion applet, we want the sample size in the applet to match the sample size in our data. All right. So can someone tell me what one of these bars represents in this graph? JJ, got an idea?
Yeah. Each one is like the mean of the sample of 12 students.
Right. And here we can see what that sample was. Like this particular blue bar was this sample that had a mean of 7.794. All right. So to find our p-value, what samples do we want to count?
.213.
7.213. That's right, because our p-value is always the probability of getting something at least as extreme as what we got in our data. So the 7.213 is what we got in our data. We want to count the samples that are at least as extreme as that. And what should we count as at least as extreme in this case? Ready? Less than or equal to, yeah, because our alternative hypothesis was that mu was less than 8. So here I got 1 out of 1,000 simulations was less than or equal to 7.213. So a p-value of 0.001. So what should our conclusion be based on that? Someone tell us strength of evidence. Mary? There is very strong evidence that, anybody have an idea of how we might want to finish that sentence? There might be different ways that we could do it. So I would probably, oh, yeah. I would probably say something like, there's very strong evidence that the mean hours of sleep in the population is less than 8. And this is a little bit vague with this in the population, because this is whatever population we feel we can best justify generalizing from our class last night to. So maybe we want to generalize to the mean hours of sleep of all UWEC honors students, or the mean hours of sleep of, I don't know what the like breakdown of this class is in terms of majors and class years. Or we might want to generalize it to the mean hours of sleep of this class in the long run, if we think that last night was a good representation of how much sleep you typically get on a typical night. Questions about this activity?
Do we always have to specify the mean hours? Or the thing that is like the
Yes, so I would say the mean here, I mean, if you wanted to say the average, that's fine too, but you do want to make it clear that you're not talking about a proportion. All right, nice job today. I will see you all tomorrow for some additional methods that we can use to work with means. You okay there? Yep. All right.
I don't know if we'll be in class tomorrow because I have to get my basic life support.